Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
This week, we're ending out our political fiction festival with 2005's V For Vendetta.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Palcher.
The year is 2020. A virus has ravaged the population. A previously free democratic society has been splintered by a totalitarian government bent on an antiquated notion of returning itself to former glory by scapegoating undesirable others into rendition camps and pumping a 24-hour propaganda news cycle into the home of every citizen to remain in control. Of course, this is the fictional movie V For Vendetta. In no way does it have anything to do with what's happening in the world right now.
I definitely, as over dramatic and wild as this movie can be, I multiple times wrote, sound familiar?
I mean, there's some on the nose moments here, man. Like I forgot all about, I'm sorry. Deep Dive Film School, please like and subscribe. We kind of jumped in pretty quick.
That's okay.
Like I completely forgot about the virus subplot.
Me too.
And once that popped up, I was like, oh, come on, man. Salt in the wound. A little bit
obviously,
too much here.
I keep hitting on it, and obviously it's the most exaggerated, I think, movie of the festival.
Yeah, for sure.
That does not make it not relevant.
Or scary.
Because curfews, protests, masks, viruses, everything.
Mean, listen, if we had reviewed Wag the Dog in 1998 or 99, whenever it came out, and we would be like, I mean, this is pretty far-fetched, but it's pretty interesting. And nowadays we're like, you probably couldn't make this now because it's a little on the nose. It would be like, if you tried to make this movie now, people would be like, too soon, dude. Like,
I really wonder how different it would be. Obviously, this is written by Lilly and Lana Wachowski. For a long time, I thought they directed it, but they did not direct it. It's their assistant director who had worked on some of the Matrix movies and Speed Racer and some other things. But
you know what's the one that evokes it to me that I was like, oh, he was, I believe, the DP on Dark City.
Huh.
And that makes a lot of sense with this movie because there's massive sections of this movie that also are not so much loaded with exposition as they are loaded with these bits of action that feel like a montage. And Dark City has to do the same thing. There's huge sections where it's like, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this. Because this movie is pretty wide in its scope of things that are happening.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here for sure. There's a lot to cover, and you have to really be paying attention to really fully appreciate this movie, which I do. Watching this, I definitely was like, oh, this seems like a Wachowski movie still, even though they didn't direct it.
Totally.
They're all over this.
Totally.
So, that's interesting to hear the Dark City side. So I can see that a little bit, but, and he went on to do some other stuff, but nothing nearly as impactful or memorable as this one. Very much like our episode last week where we did The Contender. That guy kind of went on to do a few things, but nothing of note necessarily. This movie is of note to me. You're in this future British tyrannical state based around a movement of freedom fighters, this freedom fighter named Z. I'm kidding, it's not Z.
It's S. S? Neither one of those are right.
Right?
S?
Right?
You didn't, Palcher, you didn't watch the movie, did you?
We're doing S for sexy, right?
Is that that's the porno?
The porno version of V For Vendetta.
Oh, you're like, the file under things you didn't have to do but did, right? Like, it's all about coulda, not shoulda.
That's
Yes. Well, and I think we have to. I'll touch on it just briefly here, and then I'm going to do a Professor Bullshit a little bit later on. But I do want to touch on the Alan Moore connection here.
Yeah, for sure. His comic book, he hates this movie.
Well, he hates all the movies that have been made out of
That's
his.
True. He doesn't seem like a very happy guy.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll get into a little diatribe about that later. But I do think just the parts that are similar here that are so interesting is, obviously Moore's take. Moore's take was in the late 80s, early 90s. He wrote the book in the early 80s, and it was very much looking at Margaret Thatcher's reign and this sort of Thatcherism, which was more of it was a different kind of authoritarianism, and in the book, he has that basically the fascist sort of bent to it is that different areas of London are different parts of this sort of fascist body. So there is the intelligence is the ear and surveillance is the eye. And then the police squad are the fingers. And that's where the term fingermen come from. And this movie kept that. And we know that they're called the fingermen, and they're sort of these secret police. It's very much, these thought police kind of characters. There's lots of this 1984 style propaganda posters everywhere. But I think
John Hurt says this is very similar to 1984. A lot of similar themes,
totally,
no doubt.
And I think to go to this brilliant streak of using the iconic image of Guy Fawkes and this 5th of November. It's like Guy Fawkes, 5th of November.
Remember.
Vendetta, V, the Roman numeral 5.
Yeah,
there's multiple are just over and over and over and over and over.
It really, it's endless, and that's what makes this movie fun to watch, because you're trying to put together all the little things, of what they're trying to do, because it's very clever in how they apply those. Like you said, the Roman numeral 5, 5th of November, vengeance, vendettas, all sorts of things. And, he goes on this like diatribe when we first meet him with this like poem of all these V's, victorious, all this stuff. Like, I think he says something like 50 V words and within a minute or two.
Yes. And it's
super fun.
And it's worth noting a lot of that is the Wachowskis. A lot of that stuff. In fact, cool. A lot of the really, there are huge sections of this movie that are pulled straight from the comic book down to verbatim dialogue. And then there are huge aspects of it that are all Wachowski. I mean, the book, the graphic novel is almost 300 pages long.
He was pissed that like they don't even say the word fascist in this movie.
Well, and he was also pissed that and it makes sense because the screenplay was adapted by two Americans. It was Americanized. It was really changed from being about authoritarianism, fascism, and then anarchy as its sort of other in the character of V. To really the difference between authoritarianism, fascist conservatism, and sort of thought crimes, and then the flip side of that being liberal left-leaning politics. And that is true. And you know what? I think in its own way, it still completely works as its own being that is birthed from the same idea. And I think the Wachowskis should be very proud of what they created here, because they took something that already had iconography to it, and I think amped it up to this new level. It is different and it is separate, and I don't think one is better than the other, but I think that to say that this is a bastardized version of the graphic novel isn't fair, because what they've made stands on its own, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, it's going to depend on your point of view of what you think the world is, and we'll try and avoid getting on too many soapboxes in this episode, but
sure, of course.
It may be a little hard. Let's dive into kind of some of the meat of this, and let's just get into the cast. We have Hugo Weaving, who's just, obviously Mr. Anderson, but also just has this unique voice.
He is doing all the heavy lifting here. We never see his face.
Well, he does, and we never see. Well, we see it once where he kind of dresses up like an old man. Natalie Portman's fucking awesome here. Stephen Fry, John Hurt, and Roger Alam. I don't know if you remember him from Speed Racer. He was kind of the big corporate guy that like was going to be their friend, and ends up being the bad guy of the movie.
This is that or who does he play in V for Vendetta?
He is the most perfect conservative talking head that's screaming at the TV.
Oh yes,
the host.
Yes.
And he you know, so he's in this world, this Wachowski world. But man, I wish he didn't get knocked off as soon as he does, because I think he could have been a foil for so many other things.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's almost this cross between like Tucker Carlson and like Alex Jones, right? Like, and this whole like, I wish I would have been there, and you just go, oh my god.
Yeah, I would have beat him up. I would have.
I mean, it's like I'm sorry, but this was 2005, and literally like 3 years ago, Donald Trump said that if he would have been there when there was a school shooting, like he would have ran in and you're just like, oh, dude, you don't have to say that. You can have an opinion without sounding like a fifth grader. Like, you don't have to be like, listen, if I would have been there, I would have beat him up and took his gun. Like, stop saying that.
So we're already in the midst of this tyrannical state, right? When we start the movie, there's already curfews. Yes. You know, she gets attacked, being past curfew in one of the first scenes of the movie, and that's where V comes and saves her. Interesting note, you know, I always wondered how much of this is Hugo actually acting, because he easily could not be him. And, you know, during this poem of alliterations, you know, you really see that he's really smart, very driven. But a man named James Purefoy was originally cast and shot for 4 weeks, a la Back to the Future and C. Thomas Howell. And they recast him, and Hugo Weaving did voiceover to cover up whatever he was doing. So the guy, there's actually multiple points where the guy is in the movie and we just don't know it. That the director's like, what from the interview I read, the director said, do I know what's different? Yes. Does the audience? No. There's no way they can tell. I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's very interesting. 2 quick sidecars. 1, not C. Thomas Howell, Eric Stoltz.
I knew I got that wrong. Yes.
And sorry. 2, I'd go even more than Back to the Future. I'd say Spike Jonze's Her, where there was that other woman that had to be in that poor carpeted box reading lines with Joaquin Phoenix before they're like, no, who's that hot actress that everybody knows? We're going to have her do it. And she's like, awesome, fuck you guys. We'll see you later.
No, it was a respected, I forgot who it was who originally was in Her. But I thought it was a well-respected actress that she probably gracefully had to step away. But
all I'm saying is she wasn't in the carpeted box.
Yeah, she was in her pajamas.
Literally phoning it in.
But Evie, Natalie Portman's character, kind of gets this front row view of, you know, him beginning this revolution. Yes. And they get, you know, the fireworks, the bombs, everything, and you know, we get a taste of what he's about to do. And then we also get a taste of this, you know, I forgot his name. It's Adam something. It's John Hurt's character. He's the tyrannical dictator.
Sutler. Adam Sutler.
Adam Sutler. And he's got this room full of puppets in this dark room with a massive screen, and his face is huge, and he's just like telling them what to do. His face
is huge, and can we talk about John Hurt's bottom teeth? Those suckers are tired. Those little pieces of corn look like they're about ready to fall out. I don't know if those are his real teeth or what's going on, but dear Lord, that's rough.
I think it adds to it.
Oh, it totally does. Don't those moments have a real Terry Gilliam feel to it? This kind of Brazil, like almost absurd dystopian future. You know, thinking of something like
or even 12 Monkeys.
12
had
Monkeys,
something
that was the
similar.
one. Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
I think that those, well, and one character here that we need to make sure that we mention is I think is an incredibly underrated actor. I loved him in The Crying Game, is Stephen Rhea, who plays Finch, who's this detective who's trying to sort of discover who V really is. And is kind of
and
uncovering.
Dominic.
Yeah, and I love that actor. I think that I wish he was in more stuff because he's so good. He
is good. He's the only one really of that room. I guess him and his kind of side partner there, Dominic. Finch and Dominic are the two guys. They're the ones who are investigating V and trying to figure out who he is, where he came from.
And my only minor quibble about this entire movie, honestly, is that they have that little device that they put out so that no one can hear them while they're talking. And that little device, with the exception that they put a red LED in it, that little device is just a bedside light that you use for a book that you're reading.
I think it's great. I love it.
But it's literally that. It's the exact same thing. You can get it off of wish.com.
I agree. I know you can, but that, to me, that makes that even better.
Okay.
I love that.
I don't know. It's like the telecom thing from Phantom Menace that was actually like a lady shaver. You've seen that, right? And they just spray painted it silver, and they're like, it's great, it's fine, no one will know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much shit going on. I don't think people have time to notice the little red light.
Well, it was someone's job, and they blew it. And I hope they got fired.
I'm sorry about that. You heard it here first. I love that Evie works for this conservative news network.
Yes.
BTN.
That's pumped into everybody's house, right?
If you would have made this today, there would be an obvious two sides to this movie. There is obviously here, but I mean more media sides. Yeah. I think we really only see the conservative media side portrayed here. But, V goes on TV. He sneaks his way in there. He begins a movement, taps into everyone's TVs. And, his justification for a lot of this stuff, what's the line? He says, war, terror, and disease robs you of your common sense. I thought that was such
I mean, he really plays, he plays up to the audience's feelings of like, where he's like, you made a mistake. And he's like, but of course you did. What else could you do? Right. And that's another huge difference between the graphic novel. The graphic novel is very centered around just the character of Evie, who in the graphic novel doesn't work for a news organization. She's a teenager and she's a prostitute. She in no way wants to rebel. She doesn't have any interest in that. And V does go onto television, but in the graphic novel, he berates the public. He basically says, you ruined everything. You fucked it up. Like, we don't need you anymore. And so it's more of a personal struggle, where the Wachowskis really did this thing where they said, let V speak to the people. And I think that that's a really interesting aspect that's very different here. I like him speaking out and saying, you have an opportunity to change. As a people, you do. And that lends a hopeful aspect to this movie that I think even in its dystopian sort of worldview, and it's truly anarchistic, this movie ends with like blowing shit up, which again, I remember years ago when we reviewed Fight Club and we were talking about this concept of postmodernism, that the terrorism in Fight Club in a pre 9/11 world, that postmodernist terrorism was all symbolic. Where when you watch Fight Club after 9/11, you're like, no, they're actually blowing buildings up. And you're like, fuck, when are we going to be able to do that again? And then V for Vendetta did it. And they did it as like a hopeful ending of like, we fucking blew up Parliament, right? But you go, that's a hell of a feat to make that feel hopeful only 4 years after 9/11.
I mean, I think that shows the beauty of movies and the power of, I don't want to say predicting the future, but like, realistically thinking of these outrageous situations. Like, how many movies, science fiction movies, predicted some of the things that are happening now? Not even just with politics, but with technology.
Totally.
I think that shows it kind of goes to the heart of why I love movies, is that you could talk about anything you want, and truth is stranger than fiction, and whatever you made up, it's gonna get beaten out by whatever happens in the real world at some point.
If we on a long enough timeline,
yeah,
this will no longer seem that radical.
This is just a really well made movie. It has an intriguing story. It's fast paced. The action is awesome, which the Wachowskis are really good at, and it's just a fun movie. The punk rock side of me definitely takes certain aspects and are like, fuck yeah, burn it all down, right?
Yeah.
And I just had I don't know, it ages well. Actually, it ages too well.
Yeah, it definitely does.
But so we get these, he goes on TV and he calls for protests to stand together in November 5th the next year. And I think that is very important for the storytelling of this movie, is that people have a year to pick a side, right?
Yeah.
They have a year to decide what they think is true or where they stand. And we follow this little girl who, from this first opening television appearance, is all about V. And she's the little girl with the glasses.
Yeah.
And, something traumatic happens to her later as a symbol of what's happening here, and very, again, sound familiar moment where someone gets shot or killed and becomes a poster child for whatever.
Yeah, they become.
She
becomes the cudgel of this entire movement of really where we see a group of people actually attack one of these fingermen, which is really interesting.
V does this amazing stunt too in the studio after he steals the airtime and ties everyone up and puts masks on him, so everyone is wearing masks, and that's how he gets away. Just an awesome fun way to kind of play with what he's trying to start.
There's a lot of these heist movie moments in this movie of is he gonna get away? How's he gonna get away? What's gonna happen next? And all of that works. I love his backstory here, which is really the heart of. It's interesting. This movie and the book is called V for Vendetta, because so much of it is also about anarchy, right? And about the sort of waking up of the human spirit to being stomped down, right? But you go.
Well, they show the people watching from their homes and bars. And I think that perspective is needed to kind of show the little people rising up.
Totally. Right? But here's what's interesting is I think two things. One, the fact that our character wears a Guy Fawkes mask, that he idolizes Guy Fawkes as being this really important figure, when, Guy Fawkes was an underground Catholic who wanted to blow up Parliament to get rid of the Protestant rule and bring back Catholicism as the leading ruling religion and get rid of the Church of England. This is in the 1600s. Yeah, this is the 1600s, right? He wanted it was illegal to be a Catholic. He wanted to blow up Parliament and the House of Lords in order to bring Catholicism back to rule. That's not anarchy at all, right? So that's the first really interesting kind of contradiction, is that, and in our world, not even in the world of the book or the movie, but in our world, the Guy Fawkes mask has now also been adopted as a symbol of our anarchy for the anonymous movement, as well as protesters all around the world, right? But again, it was a guy who wanted his religion to get back in control. It's the opposite of anarchy, right? So that's the first really interesting idiosyncratic aspect. The second one is that our character within the book and the movie, our character of V is actually on a personal vendetta for both himself and the woman who died that he never met. And that neither one of those things fit into this great awakening that he tries to get Evie to understand. And those are important ideas, and they are ideas he's worth dying for. But at the same time, they're not the bulk of the movie. The bulk of the movie is a personal vendetta, which I think is, again, a really interesting idiosyncratic aspect.
I totally agree. I thought, he's actually a pretty selfish character.
He totally is.
When it comes down to it. And, even from the beginning of making a choice to take Evie back to his house and saying, hey, you got to stay here for a year, basically imprisoning her. Obviously, it's in a very luxurious place, his shadow gallery, where he has all these stolen pieces of art and stuff that you're talking about. But like just that alone and what continues to happen, he's a very manipulative person, and he has no apologies for the things that he's doing, and just kind of sees, there's some sacrificial lambs out there.
Oh,
right?
totally. Well, and Evie being top among them, right? I mean, the fact that he wants to kind of make these scales fall away from her eyes, but never asks her that. She doesn't want that. And what he really wants is, I mean, he eventually professes his love to her, but really at the end of the day, he wanted someone to carry on his legacy to make it all worthwhile. And she didn't necessarily want that. I mean, at the end, is she happy? I have no idea. She's someone different, but she almost even laments that that other part of her, whoever she was before, is dead. Right?
I think that's a worthwhile question to ask. I don't know, because on top of imprisoning her for a year, she ends up escaping through this creepy ass bishop scene. Yes. That's just like, whoa, it just makes your skin crawl. But I do think, the overarching bigger picture things that he's fighting for, like people should be afraid of their governments shouldn't be afraid of their people.
Yes.
And another one that really struck with me is that symbols are worthless without people. George Floyd would just be another black man that got killed, but he became a symbol of the Black Lives Matter movement. His brother said it in the press conference. He said he's going to change the world. Right. And it is, you're absolutely right. He's in the history books now.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. Well, and one of the last great sort of victorious things that V says, that I think, and this is again from Moore's graphic novel, is ideas are bulletproof. Right. You can shoot 100 bullets, but the idea, you will never be able to kill it. Right. All you can actually do. It's Star Wars, right? You can strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you could ever imagine.
I think another aspect of this movie that is pretty fun and interesting is really finding out who V is and investigating his past.
Well, this medical facility, right? This whole medical facility
detention center.
I mean, that whole, which is where his whole vendetta comes from. The red roses, all that aspect of it. And I think the way that it's interesting because Stephen Fry's character, we get this, he's this late night talk show host, and we get his, that he is sort of inspired by V, and he decides to take this chance and to do what he claims is, the best show of his life. And it's this very Benny Hill style slapstick comedy.
It's exactly Benny Hill.
Right? Yeah. It even has the song. It has the yakety sax song in it. But I think that it's like, it is this really interesting moment where he's like, what are they going to do? I'll have to get up and apologize. And it's interesting. Sure. I love this because we never see this enough in dystopian futures where a person in a position of privilege doesn't notice how bad things have gotten. He has a Quran, and he's, and that actually ends up with him being executed. But then what happens is Evie gets captured. And when Evie gets captured, those two different storylines of his history, of where V came from in this medical facility, and then as Evie is captured, interrogated, tortured, her head shaved, basically starved, and then she finds this rolled up toilet paper roll with this life story on it. And those two stories, the medical facility story and her torture story, suddenly come together immediately, and we start to understand that this is all one long story. Right? And that it's not her story. She's sort of this bump along the road of this thing that's
keeping her alive, though.
The story is completely keeping her alive. Now, all of this whole swath of the story is all from the original graphic novel, which again, if you think about early 80s, I can't remember the exact year that he wrote this, but Alan Moore, back then, had this storyline where these two very pivotal protagonists were a lesbian couple. And I think that that's really important, right? Is that he added that in to say, look, here are these pivotal characters, and they were essentially carted away and killed because their love was different. And to say that, like, sort of in the early height of the AIDS epidemic is a hell of a thing.
I love that part of the movie. You're not really in the moment really sure where they're going with it, because, you know, so far Evie hasn't really. She's pretty timid, right, for the first half of this movie.
Well, she's always scared. Like she says she's always scared, right?
Well, you know, she's not brave like them or him. She wants to help, but she's just, she's afraid. And so she gets captured again, gets the head shaven, like you were saying, and we really, you know, she's at her wit's end, and, you know, you get kind of this unfolding of what happened in the detention center slowly. I love how they come together, but, you know, all these parliament members start getting knocked off quickly. You know, Alam's character, the conservative new guy in the shower, who's just like watching himself. He's just such a piece. He's such a piece of shit.
Yelling along with his own voice.
Yeah, and just like practicing his like rhetoric and his soapbox and all this stuff. It's really disgusting. But you know, and I think we have to also hit on some of these beautiful moments with Evie and V. Like he is pretty smitten with her. You know, in these early parts, and you know, he really is trying to make her fearless, and he does it in a very harsh way and in another selfish way, if you ask me. You know, once we come to find out, you know, that she does finally get captured, and she's, you know, 3 counts of murder, all this stuff, but it's also, you know, he's making her his soldier.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
That's what he's trying to do.
Well, he's trying to take her through the experience that he went through, right? I mean, it down to her finding the note just as he did when he was captured, even though that's the last memory that he has. He doesn't remember anything else about himself, right? He doesn't remember who he was before all of it, because all he is now is vengeance. All he is V. Which is a really interesting character trait, I think. And it goes back to this very classic comic book trope of, you know, is Bruce Wayne, or is Bruce Wayne actually the mask, and is Batman who he actually is, right? I mean, that duality is something that I think Alan Moore has always loved. In
For sure. With. And they tie that together near the end, that V is everyone, and, you know, and you get this scene of everyone taking their masks off, and you see everyone throughout the movie that we've seen possibly die or stand up for people or whatever it may be. And I don't know. The bigger picture, I understand the sacrifice, but for a movie character, you know, I think it's important to see how selfish he's trying to be for the sake of the movement, right? For the sake of the revolution.
Well, and I think that those dichotomies, those concepts, are what Alan Moore was really getting to. And if I may, can I just for a minute do a little professor bullshit here?
Please do, Professor.
Okay. So, you know, in the early 80s, comic books became serious, right? And so Alan Moore was one of a sort of stable of writers. So you had Alan Moore, you had Neil Gaiman, you had Frank Miller. You had this group of incredible writers.
That's a trio right there.
Right there, yeah. But Alan Moore was really at the forefront of that. So, I mean, let's just go down the list of these things. So his award-winning run on the Swamp Thing, you had V for Vendetta, From Hell, he wrote that, The Watchmen, and Batman the Killing Joke. All of those are his. And each one of them, he was really interested in what superheroes said about the human condition. Obviously, here with V for Vendetta, it gets into this whole idea of fascism. But you even look at something like The Watchmen, is so much about what happens when you have a character who has a superpower, but they're not a police officer, right? They don't work for the government. They're out there doing this on their own based upon their own concept of justice. That's fascism at its core, right? Like all of a sudden,
no doubt,
you're peeling apart these ideas, these really fundamental ideas. Now, what I think makes Alan Moore so interesting in this way. Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, like, think about what the Joker represents, and it's exactly what you're describing.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, and what Batman also represents, right? Batman doesn't work for the state. He doesn't work for Gotham County. He's just out there dealing out his concept of justice. So, Alan Moore was always really interested in these ideas. I think the problem with Alan Moore is that he's so good at creating a universe to play with these notions that the rest of society sees what he did and they go, now that bright shiny toy, I want to play with it now. Because I don't know if you watched the Watchmen TV series.
Fuck yeah, it's the best show I've seen since Breaking Bad.
Exactly. And it had nothing to do with Alan Moore, and he refuses to watch it, and he says, take my name off of it, I don't want anything to do with it, right? And
well, it's post his comic though, right? I mean, the show is
But what I guess what I'm saying is that as a jumping off point, he made such a brilliant argument, right? That everything that was done after it made him mad. He's kind of the opposite of Stephen King. Like Stephen King, basically, after he got mad at Stanley Kubrick, he's like, yeah, they should make musicals out of my books. I don't care, right? And like anytime somebody, like they did that horrible Dark Tower movie, and he was like, they were like, what do you think of it? And he's like, I don't know, might work. Like, he just does not care at all. Meanwhile, you have Alan Moore, who, like, these are his babies, and he cares so much about it that when it's changed even to the nth degree, he's like, not my story anymore. And I can respect that.
I was going to say, I respect that to a degree.
But to give you an idea here, you know what isn't an Alan Moore trope from the V for Vendetta movie? All of the people getting a mask and confronting the cops. That's pure Wachowski. That does not exist in the graphic novel at all. And it might be the most powerful moment. It is the Spartacus moment, right? It's the, we are all Spartacus. I am Spartacus. I am Spartacus. It's that moment. And the cops can't do anything but back down. And it's this like power to the people revolution. Never appears. Because what Moore was interested in is the ambiguity of fascism and the ambiguity of anarchy. Because his fingermen and his sort of body politic, literally, of this whole fascist organization, they are well-rounded, well-crafted characters who have home lives and wives they go home to. They are not a face on a screen. This is not General Huck spitting and screaming and doing his best Hitler impression, like we see here with Hurt's character.
He's getting pissed, right? He continues to get pissed, and his go-to, again, sound familiar, is embedding fear into society and
completely
let them know why they need us
completely. And that was actually the stuff that Moore was kind of against, is that he was like, this whole like the big red and black banners, like that idea, that iconography, which I love. But it makes it really easy to dislike that government and say it needs to be overthrown. And I think what Moore wanted was something more nuanced, which was, is V a good guy or is he not? And we get a taste of that in the movie, but we definitely prefer his version of reality to John Hurt's version.
That's very interesting to kind of see the dichotomy between the two and what he was going for and what they shaped it to be. I hadn't realized that part of it. I knew there was stuff changed that pissed him off, but that's really interesting. And the fact that he put the power in the hands of the people, which maybe he's just jealous he didn't think of that. I don't know.
I think it's that it's too happy. I think it's that it leaves you too comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with
he
him,
wants to make you uncomfortable.
yeah, he wants you to be like, well, maybe V is just a terrorist, right? Like he wants to leave you in that weird zone.
He definitely is, and after they figure out that that he imprisoned her a second time,
yeah,
she's rightfully pissed. But we also get this redemption where she kind of awakens out in the rain, and all this big dramatic scene, and you want like how much of that, like her transformation, is important to the story.
Well, it makes me, I kept thinking about the Tyler Durden kiss that Ed Norton's character gets in Fight Club, where he's like, don't run water over it. And he's like, I want you to be with the pain. And he sits there and he watches it burn. And then he says to him, it's only after we've lost everything that we fear nothing, right? He's like, now you're free. Like, I've freed you from this. And that's very much what V does to Evie. Whether or not she wants it, again, is sort of not the point. It's not the movie's point. It's not supposed to be V's point. It's just, here, now you're free. Now you can do whatever you want. But he's broke her in this way where, like, kind of in some ways, all she's good for now is vengeance. All she's good for now is to pull that lever on the train, right?
Yeah, you feel bad for her character, even though she does kind of prevail. You still are like, you really got forced into this because you're pretty, right? Or you're innocent,
you're whatever.
Your parents were protesters, and she saw her parents. We find out that she saw her parents killed in front of her, and
again, that's more
obviously something that she takes to heart and could never forget, which is why she's not brave at the beginning. But that's a very fragile state that you're messing with,
and that's still more character development than the graphic novel version of her got. Graphic novel version of her parents were not revolutionaries. They didn't get killed in front of her. She doesn't have any reason for vengeance. So the Wachowskis, again, even built it up and gave her more. So we're talking about this, that she was manipulated by V, and she has more autonomy in the movie than in the original graphic novel. So she still has more reason for that vendetta and vengeance. It's such I feel like it rides this really fine line between being a really fun, action-packed movie that does have this feeling of like importance and this feeling of like revolt to it, while at the same time having enough of this gray area to make you go, okay, I'm hearing the overture at the end as I'm watching the clock from Big Ben explode out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I'm feeling like, fuck yeah. And then there's another part of me that's like, this is icky. And I can feel it all at the same time. And I'm like, that's impressive, because like, that's a hell of a feat to have your movie, again, as I said at the beginning, end with that and not have people go, ugh. Right?
Well, and I think this is obviously two very extremist states too. I think if you gauge most people, a lot of people are more in the middle and just want to go on living their lives. Like, what that person over there does with their life over there doesn't affect me. Do what you want to do. But I do think it's predicting a lot of what is happening now with division, with media, with manipulation.
Well, and let's
creating chaos. Mask equal force. Let's arrest more people. Sound familiar?
Okay.
And then we get Finch. Am I all right? Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say this, because I don't want to lose this point that you made a second ago. And the point is this. You said most people are in the middle, right? And what most people want is to just go about their life. But, and this is according to not according to reality, this is according to the movie. When you kill hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people and take away their livelihood and take away their ability to just go about their lives because your government creates a virus to scare people into subservience, then when they find out the truth, they will revolt, because they can't go back to complacency. So that's in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I am not I am not a 5G person. I don't believe that. I don't think that that's where coronavirus came from. But I will say, regardless of where COVID-19 came from, the restlessness that you see in our country over these protests and the police and Black Lives Matter and all of that, I do think it is in part because people cannot return to a complacency because most of us are still stuck in our homes, right? I think that's the second match on the dynamite, right? And that was true in this movie too. That was true in this story. Is that's why everybody's sitting around like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Is because there is this virus, which is like another layer, right?
It goes back to the quote I said earlier about war, terror, and chaos and disease will kind of disable your common sense, right? You don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So it's it's pretty interesting. I love this scene where they finally get the Chancellor underground.
Yes.
And he's the biggest fucking baby you've ever seen.
Sobbing.
He just crumbles, and I think that it's
the first time we've seen him in person. All the rest of the time we've just seen his giant head, right? Like Oz.
Yep. Exactly. No, he's completely Oz the whole time. That's been his character outside of starring in that like spoof of him, which isn't really supposed to be him.
But it's got to be him, right? That's got to be John.
I do love the Stephen Fry line where she's like, "Is everything a joke to you?" He says, "Only things that matter."
Only things that matter.
I love that line. But this movie has a lot to unravel. I love that final scene where V's not gonna go out just by giving up and working together with someone. He's a true anarchist, and the security of the country is at risk, and we need to arrest more. We need full compliance, is what John Hurt says.
Yes.
And he really just hands the keys over to Evie and says, this is your revolution now. Puts him on the train. We get that blowing shit up at the end that we all love.
And it's interesting because at that moment, that is one of the most. And again, this is all Wachowskis. This whole train and the switch thing is all Wachowskis.
Oh, it is. Okay.
This idea that he leaves the decision up to her. That's how he truly knows that he has at least changed one person's mind. And that part is the same. I think that's all he's trying to do in the graphic novel is change one person's mind. But the fact that he's created this entire thing with the train and the explosions and everything else. And he's like, this is my gift to you. And if you don't want to do it, you can walk away. But if you do it, then I've succeeded because I've won one person.
For sure. The world needs more than a building right now. It needs hope, right?
Yeah.
That's her line at the end. And and the fact how he frames anarchy in this movie, like, how much you can change by blowing up a building? Like, people freak out about that.
I mean, again, dude, we're talking
very relevant.
4 years after 9/11. Like, it's kind of a fucking brilliant feat that people didn't lose their shit. I guess everybody wanted to get back to watching movies and hanging out again. But god damn, man, that's a hell of a thing to say in a movie 4 years after that.
It also speaks to our lack of concern about, it's over now. The virus is gone pretty much, so we can just go back to normal.
It's over.
But
didn't you guys hear? It's over. Everything's over. Why aren't you over at my house right now? Why are we doing this thing?
When racism's over, I'll come over to your house.
Oh God, how long does your Zoom account last?
We'll see. Wild, weird, fun, just very relevant movie.
Yeah.
And, I mean, obviously, again, a lot of this is over exaggerated, but is it?
I mean, once we see those soldiers with their guns walk out and the streets are all barricaded, I was just like, oh my God. Like, how much?
Yeah, this was, part of the reason, I chose this festival as an idea for a festival was, political fiction is a thing these days, whether you like it or not. And whichever way you lean, it's political fiction is a reality.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting to look at these movies and kind of the dissection of government and the innately corrupt nature of government in general, and like it systematically was built for certain people. It it benefits people that don't have a voice, or I mean it hurts people that don't have a voice, right? And people vote against their best interests all the time, and it's infuriating to watch because ignorance is bliss, right? Most people, like I said, just want to live their lives and don't really care about politics.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and the system has gotten smart enough to be able to manipulate your emotions to get all the things that it wants, and you feeling like, I really stuck it to the other guy, right? And I think that's
like, no, you just tweeted, man. You didn't.
Yeah, you didn't do anything. You just liked somebody else's political statement on Facebook. But I think
that you agree with.
Well, and I think it's it's when the super rich guy, hands out one cookie to this character and hands out half a cookie to the other character, and then taps the one cookie guy and says, "Hey, that immigrant's trying to take half your cookie," right? And then he just walks away with the bag of cookies. And, that's what we're left with over and over and over again. So again, it's kind of a bulk word for in the same sense as science fiction is about the human condition. The political fiction is about just like our world condition, right? Like that you can always apply it. You can always find the place where it fits directly in there. Brilliant idea for a festival. Adam, it's been a little scary. I won't lie. It's been a little bit of a scary festival. Each one of these movies has kind of made me go, oh God, are we going to be okay? I think we're going to be okay. Am I going to be okay? Like, and you know what? Our movie next week is no exception.
That's true. Doctor Strangelove. We're going to recast Doctor Strangelove if it was made today. I'm really excited to do this new segment. But yeah, I agree. This festival has been fun and scary, and I didn't really know the emotions it was going to churn up when we were coming up with the movies and the ideas of what we wanted to talk about.
And none of them are really that heavy. Like none of them are that heavy. This one's movies. This is probably the heaviest.
This one's probably the heaviest, I think, as far as really splitting sides.
This has the most deaths in it.
No doubt, yeah. Of all the ones, but a lot of political corruption happens behind the scenes, and you don't really see who it affects in a movie, right? You see maybe the people it affects that helped get that revolution started or whatever it may be, but you don't see who it actually affects in real life. And the people, the vocal minority is such a relevant thing these days. And there's a silent majority that needs to show up, that needs to come out and voice their opinion.
Yeah.
And, it's part of the reason that, mail-in voting is such a scam these days is because people sitting at home are going to vote.
Yep.
They're not going to go stand in line because they don't care that much about politics to begin with. They just want to live their lives and try not to kill each other.
Try with a capital T.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
To end on that note, good Lord. No, I mean, well, listen. I think you make a really good point, and I think that to celebrate right now that the Supreme Court, just ruled protections for gay and transgender people in the workplace is massive, right? But it's like each one of these, like that happened today. 2 days ago, our president announced that they would no longer be covered by health benefits, right? Transgender people. And so you just go, yeah, like you're talking about like this tippy top of the mountaintop, decisions are being made, and the way that those boulders roll down the hill, And whoever they plow down on their way or whoever they miss on their way down, people either celebrate or they lament. And I think that it's like, it is the absolute tip of the spear when it comes to the drama of our lives, you know, even though a lot of times it can seem boring. A lot of times local politics can feel like, ugh, who wants to vote in those, right? Like just the president, right? And it's like, no. You got to get all the way down to a local level.
Yeah.
And that's where it's truly important. And I guess, you know, we'll obviously touch back on this come November, but I guess since we're doing it right now, I would say make sure that you do go vote. It is really important.
If that's not clear.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we are going to get into potentially the funniest / scariest of our political fictions next week with Dr. Strangelove. But for this week, I am Adam Sherlock.
Yes, please like and subscribe. Thank you for listening and continue to watch. We love you guys.
Bye. Did you ever read comic books when you were a kid?
Not really. You know, I grew up in a sports household, so not really.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't really. Not really. So no is the answer.
That's right. You were like Little League and like Pee Wee football and shit like that, right?
Yeah, football not as much, but baseball for sure. But yeah, I don't know, but I always loved movies from a very young age, and you know, loved comic book heroes and stuff like that. But you know, back in those days too, nerd wasn't nearly as cool as it is now.
Oh, listen here, sister. I know. As a lifelong nerd, it is a badge of honor in a way that it didn't used to be. And as someone who, my poor stepfather definitely tried to, I mean, I had my prerequisite baseball and soccer and basketball, and all I really wanted to do was go home and read comic books. It wasn't good for anybody.
That's great. Yeah, I just don't think I was smart enough to realize that, right? Like to realize like there was this other world. Like, I don't know, you think about how you discovered music that really got you into other types of music that no one listened to. You know? Because when you listen to the radio all day or watch, I don't know, ESPN all day or something, you think that's all there is in the world.
Yeah.
And you know, so it's just kind of one of those things that I don't know, I've always had the belief that you don't have to love the Beatles or anything, but you need to understand their place in history. And it doesn't matter what age you discover that, as long as you discover them, that's all that's important.
Oh, right? I definitely agree with that. I also think that part of it is that I was really bad at sports because I was a little fat kid. That didn't help.